India is a distribution starved market. It's not a product starved market. Getting 5 products launched tomorrow is very, very easy. But getting the GTM right, getting the distribution right is very, very difficult in India.
My next guest on the 1% project is Deepit Purkayastha. He is the co-founder of the Inshorts and Public App. Deepit's entrepreneurial journey started in an IIT Kharagpur dorm room with his co-founders Azhar and Anunay. 10 years later, Inshorts is India's #1 short news app with 10 million plus active users, and Public App is India's largest platform for hyperlocal content with 50 million plus active users. In this conversation, Deepit talks about how he convinced his parents to take a gap year to pursue Inshorts, his counterintuitive insights about the Indian consumer, why Inshorts and Public App are unique, what is their product moat, and much more. Subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it, and sign up to the 1% Project's Think newsletter at 1%.live. Think brings highly curated insights on leadership, career, and growth from the smartest entrepreneurs, business leaders, and investors. If you have any feedback about this conversation, speaker, and topic recommendation, you can drop me a line at pritish@1%.live. Hi, Deepit. Welcome to the 1% Project.
Thanks, Pritish. This is really an honor. You've built the platform and the 1% project as something anyone would feel like proud to be associated with. So thank you for giving me the privilege to be here.
Thank you very much for being on the show. So let's kick it off. Is a startup an extreme expression of the founder's nature?
As a binary question, the answer is definitely yes. But I think there is also some things to be kind of double clicked on in the question itself. First thing is like nature of founders in general is also not a one size fits all. And usually, like in companies such as ours, there are multiple founders. Azhar is my co-founder, Anunay is my co-founder, and everybody would have a very different nature and a very different kind of aspiration to their entrepreneurial journey. It kind of all gets superposed in what gets created, and it's really amazing to see that how those extreme expressions kind of come together, sometimes in conflict and sometimes in synergy, and then ultimately it all just makes sense. It's definitely an extreme expression. There is so much kind of hunger that drives the expression, drives the form it takes, and both your strengths and weaknesses kind of start staring at your face in an amplified way once things scale up.
You kicked off your career as a founder for the last almost 10 years. You have been the founder of Inshorts, and this has been your first job. How did you convince your parents in making this choice?
There were 2 battles I had to fight. First, I hadn't completed my degree. The first battle was that, okay, allow me to take a sabbatical from college for a year to experiment this because we think the timing for this is right. Explaining to them the value of timing, getting the timing aspect of an entrepreneurial venture, like both were really hard. That is a negotiation that I don't think I won. Like I actually lost it, but they just said, okay, you've done so much. You've like been a good boy. ठीक है, चलो, we'll allow this. Okay. Like, it was an allowance. It was a benevolent allowance rather than negotiation one hard. The biggest thing was I kind of negotiated or kind of put a perspective on the table that, okay, let me try this out for 1 year. This is what I'm expecting in the best case. This is what I'm expecting in the worst case. We'll reevaluate this conversation after 1 year. After 1 year, we were in a decent place. We had raised our angel round of investment. Then their point of view was that at least complete your degree. Fortunately enough, my professors were really cooperative. They allowed me a lot of time off classes. I didn't have to travel to campus a lot of times. And I really appreciate whatever they could do for me at that point of time. So I had to even complete my degree in the second year of the entrepreneurial venture, which was again like a big jugglery at that point of time.
Why did you think that 2013, that era, was the right time for this kind of a product?
2009-10 was the first time when people had started migrating from this application called Orkut to something known as Facebook, because Facebook was more aspirational and more cooler people in your peer group used to use Facebook. So you saw the more cooler people using Facebook. Anyone who's still on Orkut was kind of behind the curve, especially younger people who are just ending their teens. These kind of peer pressures just acts as signals, right? Like who's more cool, who's less cool. So that kind of drove adoption of Facebook like crazy in India. And that was a big impression that had formed in our mind, that the power of social media. Like Orkut was there, we used to like use it often, but the real power of social media, the amount of kind of consumption, content consumption that could be driven using a very good experience online was proven in front of us as consumers on Facebook. The concept of the news feed on Facebook was so amazing. It was the first time where people were just liking a story posted by a publisher on their page, and suddenly it would show up on your feed. It's such a novel concept. So we were very, very impressionable, and hence we also got impressioned by these kind of solutions at that point of time. And we were studying computer science and engineering. We were also strongly impressioned by Wikipedia. It was a not-profit enterprise on the internet, but we were so amazed like how it all came together. All the information just flowing in real time through moderators and a real-time encyclopedia being built. So these were the two things that were happening really in a big way at that point of time. And internet consumption had just started to begin in India, right? My parents were still using a kind of phone which didn't have internet. We were using phones that were the Nokia 1100s. It didn't have internet, but our college campuses had Wi-Fi. So we were able to see what was happening in the early days of the internet. And one thing that stood out was we were browsing through various kinds of use cases online. One thing that stood out was that the news use case online was, and the traditional publishers, whichever brands we know of, what they were doing is they were just dumping whatever content they had prepared for their kind of print slash TV scripts or whatever. They were just dumping it online in the form of listicles or articles on their website. And if you would land on such a website, you would suddenly be bombarded with, say, probably 50 links, and whatever space was left was cluttered with ads. And this would be the top kind of news which had the maximum traffic. And that was the experience. The person had to go there, then of that maze of different headlines and links, person had to select which one the person is interested to read, click on it, go inside, and still be bombarded with 10 pop-ups. And it was a really, really broken experience. So the first thing we understood was that news the form factor of news online was broken. Number one. What we used to see in our peer group is that people used to go to the common rooms and they used to just browse through newspapers, reading through headlines, and then they would just probably read through the first paragraph, and if they are interested, then they'll go and read the full story. The natural way of reading news was not something that was engineered into the product that was enabling content consumption online. The second thing that was happening is the smartphone boom that was about to happen. So the way we started was we actually said that, okay, we'll start a Facebook page. The Facebook thing that I mentioned earlier kind of became our platform for an MVP, because that's where content consumption was happening. So we launched a Facebook page where we gave 10 stories every day, summaries with the summaries, and then there were outlinks to the full articles. That page grew to about 2,000, 3,000 followers within 2-3 weeks without any kind of promotional budgets being spent on the platform. So that gave us validation that, okay, there is a need for short news. But the form factor of an application, that was something that we didn't imagine, because we ourselves were not smartphone users by that time. We didn't have internet-enabled phones. One of our users actually suggested to us that, why don't you build an Android app? This is such an amazing use case for an Android application, because people would like to consume news on the go and wherever they have internet access. And we were like, yeah, it probably sounds right. And we just doubled on that opportunity. One thing led to another, and we started understanding that both the smartphone revolution and the amount of news content and the form factor of news content online is going through a phase where there is an innovation gap. It will get filled 3 years hence. It exists today. So why not kind of capitalize on it? So timing was like the most important thing. And there was this TED talk, actually, we used to watch a lot. Don't remember who gave the TED talk, but it talks about the biggest reasons for startup failure. The biggest reason for startup failure is actually timing more than any other thing. So that person actually was an investor, and he'd like browsed through all his portfolio companies and kind of arrived at this conclusion. Those 2-3 things kind of just added up in our minds.
Your journey started from Facebook. Now, 10 years down the line, How do you see Facebook now? Do you think it is the Orkut of them, or it does have a future going ahead, or it has evolved in a new business model?
It is definitely the Orkut of then. The teenagers have actually migrated away from not just Facebook. So there was a wave of migration that started happening away from Facebook to Instagram when all our parents started coming on Facebook. So there is this concept of third space, basically, which people look online, because the first space is people's own families and their own households. When the second space is there, probably if it's a student, then it'll be their colleges and campuses. For people who are working, it'll be their corporate space. That will be their second space. And internet is the primary space where they kind of project their third space needs, which is whatever is dear to me, whatever is my interest, very, very personal, very, very private. And Facebook was serving as that third space for a lot of people till the time the first space and the third space kind of came collapsing on each other, and people were looking for a new third space, then they moved to Instagram. But I think the teenagers of today have actually even moved away from Instagram, because it's the same thing has started happening on Instagram, and the people are using things like Discord and like their own kind of micro communities of sorts. Facebook has definitely gone off. Even Instagram is also on its way out, I think.
You also say that Inshorts and Public are unique products, right? And it is in a very competitive space. Media is a very difficult space to crack. Why do you say so? And why are these two products unique?
For Inshorts, when we started out, there were hardly any short news applications in the market. Whatever existed mostly has closed down today, or exists at a very, very subscale kind of level globally in terms of short news offerings. The reason why we think that short news offering like Inshorts worked in India versus other short news offerings that were being tested in other parts of the globe is because the need for short news, we feel, is a very, very Indian need, because our mother tongue is not English. Okay? Like you and I are speaking in English, but probably when we are having a chat over a beer, we might be speaking in Hindi or probably Bengali. So, but whenever we are doing anything formal, because of our education, we want to do that in English. Somehow our brains might be wired in that way, but the ease of content consumption is much higher on their people's vernacular languages as compared to the formal dot English language, which is something that people don't use in their family. So for a news application as well, when people are trying to consume news in short format, there also the same thing applies. I think people, if they are very busy in their lives, they would want to, if they are consuming news, and that too in English, because that's their formal taught language, they'd still have that translation going on in their mind, which is kind of translating whatever they are reading into their local language, right? So short news plays a very good role there, because you don't have to consume that much and translate that much to kind of understand what's going on. That's one reason. Second, the ecosystem of news in India, the general credibility or the loss of credibility that's happening in the Indian ecosystem because of too much opinion floating around on the internet, and us taking a conscious call that we'll not have opinions and analysis pieces on the platform. That also, I think, was a key part of our PMF, that we were only facts and no opinions. Obviously, like, opinions are hard to kind of trim out, but if something is clearly an op-ed, that's not on our platform. That also enabled our growth and success in India, because people were really, really tired of getting told, or kind of to the extent to schooled or infantilized, that you should know this. But when they were put in a position of respect, customers, that okay, we'll just give you the facts, you have the right to make your own opinion, it kind of worked in a way. It struck a chord with a large consumer base.
On the face of it, Inshorts as a product looks so simple that I can copy it. So, what is your mood of being a leader and staying there as long as the product exists?
I think one thing to be kind of understood about the Inshorts platform and the simplicity and the complexity of it is twofold. So on the consumer side, the product looks extremely simple, and it's very hard to make sure that it always looks simple and still make sure that all the complexity is kind of behind the curtains. So that is definitely there with the Inshorts platform. what happens if you completely let data take over your feed? That then creates an echo chamber for you, and that echo chamber is already being created for you on social media platforms, and that's not why you as a consumer or any consumer would have downloaded Inshorts in the first place. So the complexity of making sure that it's not an echo chamber, at the same time it's personalized enough for your interest, is a very, very hard problem to solve. We have to constantly measure, we have to constantly update our models. People's interests change over time. A person who might be interested in business stories 1 year ago might only be interested in tech stories now. A person who was a general sports consumer 2 years ago might only be suddenly interested in Formula One. People's interests evolve, and kind of trying to understand that how the person is evolving and making sure the product and the services are evolving with the customer is very, very challenging. And it's a constantly iterative job. But on the other side, this is what creates our moat as well. Because we are very, very strong on capturing various kinds of data about the user without compromising the privacy of the user. So we don't know who is this customer, but we know this customer likes to read XYZ today. This customer liked to read XYZ yesterday. And how much time is the customer spending on each of those cards or the kind of posts on the platform? Which of the posts does the person go and read the full article? Which of the posts does the person share? So we have a complete profile that gets built around the person without even knowing that, okay, this is the person. We don't even need your identity. So I think that is a very, very challenging job, because we've always kept privacy as a very, very important factor while building this product. Because right at the beginning of our journey, when we started asking for a lot of permissions, our users gave a pushback to us that, why do you need XYZ to serve me news? And we actually got back to the drawing board and kind of solved around it. The second complexity is the whole supply side issues of it. The supply side is something that is a problem for all kind of products like Google News or even YouTube for that matter. Everyone who has any kind of news content flowing into their product will have those problems. So those are not unique challenges, but everybody has to build their own IP that way. Double clicking on, I think, a part of your previous question, which is, why is Public unique? Public is basically a hyperlocal social media platform. We envision it as a hyperlocal social media platform. In fact, one of the world's first hyperlocal social media platforms. What do we mean when we say hyperlocal social media? Take the contextually relevant example of India, which is, say, India has X number of states. Each state has Y number of urban centers. So India is kind of structured around all the rural villages. So India has about 2.5 lakh villages. So each urban center kind of is the nodal hub for around 25 villages around that urban center. And each district actually has about 10 to 15 of these urban centers. So usually when people say, I hail from this place in Bihar or I hail from this place in UP, they usually refer to their urban center as their native place. And then they say, and I also belong to this village. So their kind of identity about where they are from roots from the district first and then their urban center. These urban centers typically have a population of 100,000 in and around this urban center, as well as the rural places around the place. And these people didn't have any kind of public forum where their influencers could kind of voice their concerns, opinions, create content, communicate with the community. And the key opinion leaders of that place or the key influencers of that community, they didn't have any platform where they could just come online and start communicating. Twitter exists in India, but Twitter exists at the elite level of the country and kind of in a very pan-national kind of a cosmopolitan kind of a presence.
Educated.
Yes, it's for the educated. It's primarily English content, and it has made no effort to make sure that its feed is locally relevant, hyper locally relevant. So when I say hyper local, I'm talking about content that's relevant in a 5 kilometer radius. So Public was basically our endeavor to kind of make the most relevant information product for the tier 2, tier 3 audiences of the country. And a most relevant information for them turned out to be hyper locally relevant information. A person might not care about whether the RBI kind of hiked the repo rate or not, but the person would really care about if the prices of onions in their kind of local market has started increasing. A person would really care about if there is a big crime in their neighborhood, right? Because that threatens that person's own sense of security. All this hyperlocal information was never possible to be created at scale before a platform like Public came along. So on Public, what happens is when we launch a district, we go and onboard various kinds of community leaders, key opinion leaders, people like presidents of the biggest market association in that location, journalists, politicians, the local district magistrate, the local head of police, lawyers, doctors, principals of the biggest schools in that neighborhood or in that urban center. So all of these people get onboarded and they start communicating and interacting in the public forum. It's like the local town square. There are examples of people just saying that, see, they record a video that MCD, their local municipality, hasn't kind of cleared up the trash from the local hub, and next day municipality themselves is kind of putting up another video saying that, see, based on feedback we got it cleared, and things like that. So it kind of makes the country more vibrant that way. So this sort of a platform hasn't been built anywhere else in the world, because a recent study by Reuters Institute, it shows that India is one of the largest markets where the local community connect is high, as well as local content consumption is high. So if all the countries were to be put in a kind of a scatter plot, India is at the top right of this kind of a scatter plot. Indians in general are much more connected to their local communities, and there was no platform kind of bringing that behavior online. To give you an idea of scale, there are about 2 million unique videos that are getting uploaded on the platform by various all of these kind of different influencers as of today on a monthly basis. That's the kind of scale that we've reached as of today. And we think that eventually, if we could go and get all gram panchayats and their gram pradhans and also on the platform, that would be like real depth of scaling in the country.
Brilliant. And that's a very unique model of networks. Firstly, very hard to replicate. And a replication of that kind of a network will also not serve an additional value. Even if a second player walks in and gets the same network, their
Yeah.
content is probably, it can be duplicated, but it cannot be enhanced.
Yes. And there is a kind of virtuous cycle to this all, because any new influencer, if they want to kind of join a platform like this, where they can distribute whatever they want to say to a hyper locally relevant audience, they'll look for they'll go to the platform which has the highest reach. So whoever scales first will have a competitive advantage to get more creators on the platform and hence get more content on the platform, which again kind of feeds into the fact that there'll be more consumers on the platform. So it is a very, very interesting flywheel that kind of gets set in, and it's a winner takes all kind of proposition.
Inshorts was a thought of the three founders. But public is something that probably has come through all the people that are a part of the Inshort company. Or what was the process of getting to public?
In 2017-ish, the Inshorts business had started becoming profitable. And we were kind of thinking, what's our next big growth lever? We were trying to understand what are the information needs that the tier 2, tier 3 people of the country have. We experimented a couple of products, different kinds of products with very different kinds of propositions. And for example, one proposition was that, is audio, visual, or visually or graphically represented content more relevant to the regional audience? Or is it the same Inshorts kind of form factor, just in the native language of the person, more relevant? Or is it just video opinions as a platform more relevant? And we tested all of these propositions and saw the pros and cons of each kind of. So we had a very, very iterative process with the intent that we need to discover a product that works, has a high amount of retention. A biggest signal for us for product market fit is retention, like what kind of month 1 retention or day 30 retention a product is getting. And we were laser sharp at making sure that if a product that we are launching does not make the bar, kind of cross the bar, then we will kind of shut that product down. So we did that repeatedly for over more than a year. So from 2017 till 2019 March, we didn't have the proposition of public that we launched in April 2019. which is the hyperlocal video format. And how we arrived at it was obviously like a lot of key team members were involved, founders were involved, and we tested various different kinds of propositions. One thing that was key to arriving at this was that through those multiple tests, we had already learned that textual content is not that relevant for the tier 2, tier 3 audience. Because even though they might have time, even though they might have been reading local newspapers, the younger audiences who are the more digitally savvy audiences, their content consumption expectations and behavior had already migrated to video first online. So video was the way to go. The second learning was that the scale of content is required to be kind of created on the platform for the platform to be hyper locally relevant, cannot be centrally managed or curated or like that. There has to be some level of crowdsourcing. There has to be some level of creator management or creator onboarding that is required on the platform. The third thing that we understood was really, really key, and I'm sure Twitter is also coming to the same conclusions now, is how do you maintain credibility on such a platform? Because there is so much fake news that kind of gets seeded on the platform. So we took a very, very harsh call. Obviously, we didn't know the consequences of it. Thankfully, it worked out for us. We took a harsh call that we'll only have verified creators on the platform. So every creator on the platform actually has to be verified. It has to have some level of KYC verification done on the platform. And depending on the level of KYC verification, your reach on the platform, your ability to scale the viewership of your content, get more followers changes. So we have kind of 5 levels of that. So for example, a journalist might give their press card to the platform for us to verify. And if once it's verified, they get a green tick on the platform. Normal creator on the platform at least has to give their phone number to the platform. If they want to have decent enough reach in the near 1 kilometer radius also, they'll have to give their Aadhaar cards. So then they get a gray tick on the platform. So various levels of credibilities get created, and that has served us well. It has almost weeded out any kind of fake news, because what happens is if a person is creating a content in a location, right? You've seen the structure of fake news. What happens is that usually fake news is structured, it's a very engineered product, right? So it's an article about some event that has happened in some remote part of the country, and it's that event is being redistributed, packaged, and distributed to people in the different parts of the country. So there is no verifiability because it's some distant part. Second is that the person who has created that fake news article online, there is no identity associated with that article. So you cannot hold the person by their collars. The law enforcement cannot hold the person by their collars and kind of ask for answers, right? But both those things kind of get eliminated on a platform like ours. So since every creator is verified, there is always an identity associated. Secondly, when they are talking about their immediate neighborhoods, right? These communities are so tightly knit that if I, as a person, go and play some truancy on the platform, then my neighbor will know this guy is the one who actually did it. There is a social accountability that's already pre-built in. So I think these things really played a key role in the success.
Both your products have reached hundreds and millions of people. So what is your counterintuitive insight about growth?
Most counterintuitive insight is that people think that India has a billion plus people, 1.4 billion people, and it will be like very easy to kind of keep getting users on your platform. First of all, there is an upper cap established by socioeconomics. Most of the people who even have a smartphone actually use data they switch it on for some time, they send a WhatsApp message and then they switch it off. A large portion of the country who has a data connected smartphone uses this way of consuming content. If they are consuming things on YouTube, they'd probably do it very, very mindfully at a certain hour during the day, right? So it's a very, very cost conscious large segment. Including this segment also, the country has only probably 600, 700 million people who are consuming internet at least once in 3 months. And they're also not active consumers of internet. So if we keep kind of funneling the actual audience who is comfortable keeping their internet switched on throughout, who probably spends 3-4 hours on their smartphone every day, then that set kind of keeps reducing. And even to distribute to that set, channels of distribution are not very, very efficient. One would imagine that platforms like Google, Facebook have immense distribution power in India. That might be true for commerce entities or brands who are trying to sell products. But for entities like ours, who are ourselves building distribution channels in its own right, these platforms don't scale. So ultimately, the only way to scale in these places is organic growth. Unless you have referrals going your way, or unless two people who are using your product tells a third person that, okay, you should also download this application. This is such a unique kind of experience. You can't grow beyond a certain cap. There are two counterintuitive insights that I talked about. One is that TAM is not as large as it seems. And I didn't even talk about monetizability yet. The second insight is India is a distribution starved market. It's not a product starved market. We think that getting 5 products launched tomorrow is very, very easy, but getting the GTM right, getting the distribution right is very, very difficult in India. Those are the two key insights that I think are very counterintuitive.
Let's go back to Inshorts, news in 60 words. How important, and obviously you summarize the news in 60 words, but how important is visual content in creating connectivity with the consumer and virality?
In fact, that is a key aspect of when you in the beginning kind of mentioned that Inshorts is a simple product. There are aspects of Inshorts that people don't even know that there is a lot of thought that goes behind it. One of the biggest parts of that is the visual aspect. So if you see Inshorts application and you open it, almost 50% of the real estate on a single card is dedicated to the image. And the images will be of a very high quality. Like the images are very, very strong and of a very high quality. But rarely are the event images actually about the event about which the kind of content is. The reason is that usually the images that arrive from an event are usually not that clear. So we don't see images as a tool of augmenting your news article. We don't put image in a support function. In fact, we think image is the first thing that the consumer will see after landing on your card. As soon as you swipe up, go to your next card, the first thing that the consumer sees and then makes a judgment about psychologically is that news relevant for me or not? Do I want to skip this or do I want to consume this? And the first thing that kind of lands psychologically in a subtle way is the image. So the image needs to kind of visually communicate what this news is about. If this is about a rally that PM Modi has done somewhere and it has got a certain kind of response, then what imagery evokes a person's interest in that kind of story? Is it Mr. Modi himself? Is it the logo of BJP or is it something else? Similarly, if we were to talk about, say, a brand like Facebook or Meta. So we've seen that for Facebook stories, for example, Mark Zuckerberg's photo evokes interest in the same story, in the same copy, everything is the same, much more than the Meta logo or the Facebook logo. While the other thing is true for Google. So the Google founders don't evoke any kind of responses, while the Google logo imagery or the Alphabet logo imagery evokes those responses. So the system has been built over so many A/B tests around what images go with what kind of stories, and make sure that it shouldn't even be like a clickbait, right? That image kind of communicated something just for the sake of it, and then when you land onto the headline, you are like, oh, this is not even related. So it has to be related. It has to be the first thing that gets communicated about the story, and a lot of thought goes into getting those images right and building those backend systems that can get it right. So keep testing, and then kind of engineer it back into the system.
So before we close, what is the kindest thing that anybody has done for you?
The kindest thing anybody has done for me would be, I think, giving honest feedback is the kindest thing someone could do to any other person. Thankfully, my wife is the first person who, and in a very responsible way, to give me the first feedback on anything. That honest feedback kind of gets missing when one starts growing, because people are more biased to kind of believe in you and agree with you than to question you. So I think that is something really key. And in fact, that has helped me also nurture people and relationships around me at work and otherwise. That you can give me honest feedback as long as you're not mistreating me or disrespecting me. You can give me honest feedback. I'll try to take it the best way possible. And I think that's a learning curve. It's really hard. It's easy to say that you make that kind of space around you, but it's really hard to do it with substance.
Brilliant. I think that's a great place to close this conversation. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Pritish. It was an honor to be here.